The United Nations Security Council heard that the ongoing conflict and insurgency in Somalia continues to have an adverse impact on civilians. The United Nations head of assistance mission in the country says there have been over 1,200 civilian casualties in early data attributed to Al-Shabaab attacks. Raad Peace Research Institute presented a policy brief last year exploring possible ways to end the conflict in Somalia. Its founding Director, Dr. Mohamed Gaas, joins us now. Thank you very much, Doc, for your time this morning. Perhaps we can start to the genesis of the conflict. What do we need to understand about it?
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to the program. I think we have to understand the conflict has been mutating initially from 1991 as different rebel groups, and then it become fragmented further. Those rebel groups become fragmented into warlords, and then Islamic cults, and from Islamic cults, Al-Shabaab has emerged. So that means we really need to end this conflict once for all. It cannot just continue forever, which is not in the interest of Somalia, the Somali population, and the region.
Okay, let's go back to this conversation where the UN Security Council heard that the ongoing conflict and insurgency in Somalia continues to have adverse impact on civilians. The United Nations head of assistance mission in the country has said that there have been over 1,200 civilian casualties in early data attributed to Al-Shabaab attacks. Raad Peace Research Institute presented a policy brief last year exploring possible ways to end the war in Somalia. Its founding director, Dr. Mohamed Gaas, has graciously still stuck with us. Thank you very much, Doc, for your patience and your indulgence. You explained the genesis of the conflict. What then should we understand about the operations of Al-Shabaab? Where do they get the weapons? Where do they get the money? How are they still managing to stay relevant in the country?
Thank you so much. Al-Shabaab is a very clandestine organization. It has its own network, and networks that supplies them with the weapons they need. But also it has sufficient funding sources that allow it to get whatever weapons it needs and carry out its different terror operations. And for that reason, it has become very resilient. It has been there for the last 15 or 16 years, although still there has been, more than 25,000 African Union peacekeeping troops in Somalia, which means, we actually need to find ways to deal with it and to end the conflict, which is very costly to the Somali population, and also which is a risk for the region and regional security. Al-Shabaab is not just a terrorist group that operates in Somalia. It also carries out from time to time terror attacks in Kenya. It has carried out in Uganda. It has tried to infiltrate into Ethiopia. So that means, we have to support the current offensive of the Somali government against Al-Shabaab that started from last year. Now Al-Shabaab has been weakened, but then that's not sufficient. We need to support the efforts of the government, but also to explore possible alternative ways to end this conflict, including dialogue and negotiation with Al-Shabaab.
I'd like for us to expand on that, but perhaps take a look at this. You mentioned that there's African Union peacekeepers in Somalia. Does it suggest then, as you encourage for the supporting of the Somali government in fighting Al-Shabaab, that the Somali government is on its own? How effective has the peacekeeping mission in the country been?
It has not been effective. It seems more or less Somali government, it is carrying the offensive of its own, supported by the local Somali population, called Ma'awisley. It's the local communities organizing themselves and opposing Al-Shabaab and carrying weapons to fight Al-Shabaab, supported by the government. So the African Union peacekeeping mission has not been effective. Initially, they did a lot of good work for the initial years, but for the last 5 to 6 years, they have not carried out any meaningful operation against Al-Shabaab or offensive. And in a way, they have become a sitting duck, just sitting there in their bases, which forced the Somali government actually to rely on it itself. So what we need now is also there has been an obstacle for the Somali National Forces to clear out Al-Shabaab because of they are facing a situation where they lack, adequate military hardware given due to the sanctions, arms embargo sanctions on Somalia. And we need these sanctions to be lifted if Somalia has to effectively fight Al-Shabaab.
If I'd like for us maybe to describe a typical day or life in Somalia, more so Mogadishu, right? So if I leave Southern Africa and I head for the Horn of Africa, what can one expect, right? Because when you speak of Somalia, there is also what is it called? Maybe not misconception is not the right word that I'm looking for, but where it's a widely held belief that it's not safe. And so even people from the continent fearing to visit. What is the daily life like? How can you describe it to some of us who've never been to Mogadishu?
I think there is a frightening degree of security in different parts of Somalia. There are some parts that are quite safe, relatively safe. And most of the security issues are within and around South Central Somalia and areas controlled, areas contested between the government, the federal government, and Al-Shabaab. But also Al-Shabaab does it carry out suicide bombing and assassinations in the capital, Mogadishu, which gives this kind of image of Somalia being insecure. But then to the Somali population, they have no other means, They have to be resilient. You could see an explosion happening today, but then life goes on tomorrow where, the Somali citizens, they clean up whatever that has been destroyed and they rebuild. And this is the amazing part of Somalia. So in that sense, given the resiliency that Somali population has shown and various efforts the Somali government has been undertaking, we need to support. We need to support Somalia in terms of security, in terms of stability, in terms of institutional building, including Somali National Armed Forces. And we need to support them not only for the Somalia's sake, but also for the fact that the longer Al-Shabaab stays, the longer insecurity stays in some parts of Somalia, the more, regional insecurity becomes a real threat to the entire region, which could expand further into different, other different parts of Africa.
Okay. You mentioned that you would like to, or rather, your organization, the Research Institute, has put together some recommendations in terms of finding a lasting solution to the problems that are faced by the country. You mentioned dialogue on the part of whom?
Yes, that's exactly, because we need, at the end of the day, even if Al-Shabaab is militarily defeated, there is a possibility that Al-Shabaab could stay as a terror network. And this brings us back to the issue of security and insecurity. We need to find a way to conclude this conflict, meaning to open up a dialogue with Al-Shabaab and possible negotiations to end the conflict also for all. Because of normally, in any conflict situation, there could be one of the actors defeating the other. And in this case, I would like to say the Somali government will, in some point in the future, be able to defeat Al-Shabaab. But then that will not be enough, because if you have to end a conflict, that you have to provide, a leeway, a way that, negotiations is a part of it.
Thank you very much, sir, for your time this morning, because you also take a look at the makeup of the country. 2019 statistics, at least, revealed that people that were under the age of 15 made up some 42.4% of the population. People that were 15 to 29 years old made up 27% of the population. And so it makes you wonder what kind of generations are being built as well. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Dr. Mohamed. Mohamed Gaas, Raad Peace Research Institute Director. Let's tell you about the first annual Festival of Nigeria, which took place in Johannesburg this week. It was created to celebrate the diversity of the African continent and promote unity. Friends and family met at the Marks Park to enjoy some food, music and fashion. And Newzroom Afrika's Lobang Mogai was there.
Africa unites in joy and diversity. That's the theme of this year.